At its peak, the Roman Empire had 450,000 soldiers stationed across 3 continents, from Britain to Syria, Germania to Africa. Each soldier needed 3,500 calories daily just to survive. That's 1.5 billion calories per day, delivered to deserts, mountains, and frozen frontiers without fail. No trucks, no refrigeration, no GPS. Just Roman engineering and relentless planning. The Pentagon still studies how they did it. Modern military academies teach Roman logistics as foundational doctrine. This is the story of the greatest logistics operation in ancient history. When we think of Rome's military dominance, we picture legions in formation, gladius swords flashing in sunlight, massive siege towers rolling toward city walls. But that's only half the story of conquest. But Rome's true weapon wasn't steel, it was grain. Before a single sword was drawn, Rome had already won the war in granaries and on grain ships. Logistics determined victory. Today we're breaking down the engineering and mathematics of feeding an empire at war. The numbers are staggering, the solutions ingenious. The lessons still relevant to modern military operations worldwide. And the lessons? Still taught at West Point, Sandhurst, and military academies worldwide. Roman supply chain management remains the gold standard for pre-industrial logistics. Let's start with the raw numbers. At its peak around 211 AD, Rome fielded approximately 450,000 soldiers. That's 33 legions with roughly 182,000 legionaries and another 250,000 auxiliary troops spread across the known world. They were spread from Hadrian's Wall in Britain to the Euphrates River in Syria, over 2,700 miles, from the Rhine frontier in Germany to the scorching deserts of North Africa. Each soldier required about 3,500 calories per day during standard garrison duty. On marching days, that number could spike to over 4,000 calories to sustain their energy and combat readiness. Do the math. 450,000 soldiers times 3,500 calories equals 1.575 billion calories daily, just to keep the army fed at minimum levels. That's before accounting for pack animals and support staff. Now convert that to grain. Each legionary received approximately 850 grams of wheat per day, nearly 2 Roman pounds as their foundation. This was the backbone of military nutrition. For 450,000 men, you're looking at roughly 380 metric tons of grain every single day. That's just the wheat requirement alone, not counting bacon, cheese, oil, or other provisions. But grain wasn't everything. Add bacon, about 100 grams per soldier daily, plus cheese, olive oil, vinegar for pasta, and legumes like lentils. The complete ration was carefully calculated. Conservatively, the total food requirement was around 900 tons per day minimum. That's the weight of 6 blue whales delivered daily across an empire spanning 3 continents. And it had to reach soldiers in Britain's rain-soaked forts, Egypt's scorching deserts, and Germania's frozen forests without fail. Every day, every season, for centuries. Compare this to modern militaries. The U.S. military, with all its trucks, cargo planes, and satellites, still struggles with logistics at this scale in hostile territory today. In Afghanistan and Iraq, fuel and food convoys were constant targets. Supplying forward bases required helicopter lifts and armored convoys for protection. Rome faced the same challenges without modern technology. Rome did it with wooden carts, mules, and sailing ships, no combustion engines, no refrigeration, no satellite navigation, just pure logistics, planning, and infrastructure that still impresses engineers today. Here's the 4-month problem. Grain spoils. In Mediterranean heat, Unprotected wheat could rot in weeks without proper storage. Mold, insects, and moisture were constant enemies. Armies moved at 12 to 18 miles per day on good roads. Ox carts managed 10 miles per day maximum. The math of distance versus time was critical to survival. If your supply depot is 200 miles behind the front line, that's 20 days of travel one way. Any disruption, bandits, weather, enemy raids, meant starvation within days. Rome's answer was the Annona system, a state-controlled grain supply network combining military logistics with industrial-scale agriculture and maritime empire. It was revolutionary. Egypt was the crown jewel. After Augustus annexed it in 30 BC, Egypt became Rome's breadbasket, producing massive grain surpluses annually from the fertile Nile Valley. The Nile Valley produced an estimated 20 million modi of grain annually. That's roughly 136,000 metric tons, feeding over 200,000 people yearly, just from one province. North Africa, modern Tunisia and Libya, produced even more. Together, these provinces generated hundreds of thousands of tons of surplus grain annually for the empire's military machine. Transporting it required the largest ships in the ancient world. Roman grain ships could carry 1,000 to 2,300 tons of cargo each, vessels that wouldn't be surpassed for over a millennium. The Isis, a famous Alexandrian grain ship, was 55 meters long and 14 meters wide. These vessels weren't surpassed in size until the 19th century Industrial Revolution. A single grain ship could carry enough wheat to feed a full legion, 5,000 men, for nearly a month. The Mediterranean became a grain highway connecting empire to army. Ships sailed from Alexandria to Ostia, Rome's port, in about 2 weeks with favorable winds. From Carthage, the journey was even faster, just 7 days in good conditions. But shipping was only half the equation. Storage was critical. Rome's solution, the Horrea, massive state granaries engineered for preservation without refrigeration. Roman Horrea used thick stone walls for thermal mass, keeping interiors cool. Raised floors elevated grain above moisture with air circulation underneath, passive climate control. Small, strategically placed windows provided ventilation without excessive heat. Many were oriented north to minimize sun exposure throughout the day, ancient passive cooling. Some Horrea were partially underground, using Earth's stable temperature. Grain could be stored for 2 years without significant spoilage, no electricity required. By the 2nd century AD, Rome had nearly 300 Horrea across the empire. Ostia alone had dozens, each storing thousands of tons for strategic reserves. But how did grain get from Mediterranean ports to legions on the Rhine frontier? This required masterful planning and flawless execution across 800 miles of hostile territory. Every night, Roman armies built fortified camps, not just tents, actual fortified cities constructed in 3 to 5 hours by trained legions working with military precision. A legion of 5,000 men created ditches, ramparts, wooden palisades, gates, and internal roads. By sunset, they had a defensible position ready for attack. Pre-positioned supply depots were spaced every 200-250 miles along major routes, about 3 weeks of marching. These were fortified and permanently staffed with guards. For every legion, over 200 mules carried essential supplies. Soldiers themselves carried 3 days of grain, about 2.5 kilograms, plus all equipment. Total load, 30 kilograms. Speed mattered critically. Mules covered 18-20 miles daily on good roads. Ox carts hauling heavier loads managed only 10 miles per day maximum, half the speed. A single legion consumed 13.5 tons of food monthly. Multiply by 33 legions. Rome was moving the equivalent of entire cities across continents every single month. The U.S. Army War College still studies Roman logistics today, not as history, but as foundational doctrine. The principle remains unchanged. Logistics wins wars, not tactics or bravery. The phrase beans before bullets comes from this understanding. Ammunition is useless if troops are starving. Rome knew this 2,000 years ago and built their empire on it. Alexander the Great lost 75% of his army in the Gedrosian Desert, not from battle but from starvation when his supply fleet was delayed by storms. Logistics failure equals death. Rome sustained legions for over 500 years through infrastructure, stockpiled reserves, and planning for disruption. They built an empire on logistics, not just military might. Modern supply chains use Roman models: hub-and-spoke systems, pre-positioned inventory, synchronized delivery, all pioneered by Rome's military machine 2,000 years ago. When Roman logistics failed, empires fell. The crisis of the 3rd century saw supply lines collapse, legions unpaid, and provinces seceding from Rome. Supply failure meant political collapse. Rome didn't conquer the world with swords. They conquered it with supply chains and grain ships that could carry 300 tons across the Mediterranean. With granaries that kept wheat fresh for 2 years and roads moving 900 tons of food daily across 3 continents without modern technology. When logistics worked, Rome was unstoppable. When they failed, legions starved and empires crumbled. The lesson remains unchanged across millennia. An army marches on its stomach, and Rome understood that better than anyone before or since. This was their true genius.